Hey guys, welcome to Capturing Christianity. Actually, let me make sure that we are live. We are live. So, welcome to Capturing Christianity. I've got Dr. Tyler McNabb today. We are reviewing the movie Sound of Freedom that was directed and was it written also by Jim Caviezel? Tyler, I may need to get some help from you on this. I know that it was inspired for sure, and now his name is complete. This is the best review of this movie so far that you guys are going to see on YouTube. His name is Tim. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right, Timothy.
Timothy. Okay, that the movie is based on. So
Yeah.
it's I guess inspired based on true events. That's what it said at the very beginning of the movie. Tyler and I actually went and saw the movie. Not together. We don't live anywhere close to each other.
We used to.
Used to. But we saw it together. Together. We didn't see it together. We saw it on the same day yesterday. But so what we're going to do today is we're going to chat about our thoughts on the movie. We're going to get some philosophical insights. Dr. Tyler McNabb, a friend of mine, he is a philosophy professor and just an all-around awesome guy. And so he's going to provide some philosophical insights that can help us think more clearly about, like, what is this movie trying to do? Maybe some philosophical tidbits that we can pull away from this movie. Because it really is, there's a lot of ethical things going on in this movie, obviously. If you know anything about this film, and I should also mention that we are going to be discussing the movie in depth. So spoiler alert, we are going to be talking about what happens in the movie and spoil things if you have not seen it yet. So if you have not seen it yet and you don't want to get spoiled, then just stop this video and watch it later after you do watch it. Otherwise, I mean, one of the things that Tyler and I were talking about last night as we were preparing for the stream today is that, like, if you know what the subject matter of the movie is about, then it's not going to be too much of a surprise what happens in the movie. So in one sense, you could just watch the stream and be okay. But yeah, so spoiler alert. All right, well, Tyler, let's get right into it. Tell me some of your thoughts as you were watching this film. What sort of stuck out to you? I took notes as like the movie was going on, so I can get to those in a little bit. But like, what are the sort of main things that stuck out to you?
Yeah, so first off, I just want to kind of clarify with everyone that I am not a fan of the whole Q theory. And by that, in some sense, I am, in the sense of the biblical studies view of Q, but not in the Q theory in reference to, kind of right-wing conspiracy theories about
Yeah.
underground cabals drinking blood of children and worshiping Satan and so forth, in which the Democratic Party is running or something like that. That I have no patience for. I'm not a fan of. I'm not a conspiracy guy. I have a COVID vaccine. I'm totally not prone to conspiracy theories. I believe in evolution and climate change, and nothing, that shouldn't worry us. However, with that said, I was inclined originally not to want to see the movie just because I'm a father of now 6 kids, and I just the topic for a relaxing day at the movies wasn't necessarily like oh, I got to see this. However, whenever you said, hey, let's go ahead and review it, I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot. Let's go. And I was going into the theater expecting kind of like a very low budget kind of evangelical Christian movie, right? I won't name names for previous movies that I'm sure your audience they're familiar with, but you can kind of get the general idea where the acting is quite poor, and there's some really sappy theme that will even make Hallmark blush. Like I was expecting that sort of acting. And I was extremely, happy with actually the acting. For the most part, I thought the acting was done really well. The visuals, you could tell it sometimes maybe that they didn't have the biggest budget in the world, but I thought with what they had, they did a really good job, and I think it was a good movie overall. I mean, there were times definitely when I was watching where I felt really uncomfortable, and I was just like, "Wow, why didn't I see Mission Impossible instead?" But I mean, that's on purpose. The movie should make you feel very uncomfortable,
Yeah.
uh, and so overall, I think it has a positive net value. I think it's going to
Hmm.
raise trafficking, human trafficking, especially child human trafficking, to a general audience who I think, honestly, the average American is absolutely clueless to. And so, we'll get into some of the criticisms of the movie. But, you know, all the critics, I'm just thinking, guys, this one movie has done more in whatever it was, an hour and a half, 2 hour movie, than you
Yeah.
have your whole life to bring awareness to trafficking. And for people who are set against the movie without even watching it, right? It had nothing to do with Q, right? There nothing to do with underground drinking of blood and sex trafficking from the Democratic Party. It had nothing to do with any of that. There was one phrase that you could have interpreted as something from Q, as something like, oh gosh, it's something about a storm, right? There's some famous line in Q in reference to the storm is coming or entering the storm. Other than that, I couldn't find anything at all that was related to that. So for those of you who are inclined not to watch the movie just because of you think maybe it's associated with an actor or two who flirts with the theory, don't let that ruin the movie for you, right? Like, actually just go see the movie and judge for yourself, and you'll see that it is a genuinely good movie. And as we'll get into in a few minutes, a lot of this very much is historically accurate.
Yeah, when I was thinking about there's so many thoughts that I want to share on the show today about this movie. It was very, very interesting. Just the opening scene immediately made me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And that was for sure on purpose. Like just the opening shot, which was a beautiful shot. And I was actually amazed watching the film that they were only, I think the budget was like 15 million for the whole thing, which is crazy. Like I looked up the director of photography to see if he had worked on other films that I was familiar with, and he hasn't, but he nevertheless did a really, really good job. So the director of photography, you don't know, like organizes all the cinematography and everything, and the way that the shots look and all that. So it looked really, really high budget. But it wasn't. But yeah, just the opening scene was super, super moving, and it immediately made me uncomfortable and almost regret my decision to do this. Like I was regretting sitting in the theater watching this movie, and I was thinking, like, how much more time do I have to sit here and watch this? But as I watched the whole movie, there's sort of two criteria that I use to judge a film. And one of them is, does it have a good story? That's pretty obvious. And then the other one is cinematography. Like, is the cinematography good? Do they have really cool looking shots? And does that sort of go along with good moving music and everything? And I think on both of those accounts, the movie did really well. So the story was really good, I thought. It told a coherent narrative. There were some plot holes, like some very minor plot holes, but overall, it was a really good story. So I would, in terms of story, I'd probably give it like a B or an A. And then the cinematography, again, they were working with a really low budget. Nevertheless, it was really good. There were some pretty nice looking shots. So overall, I would say probably on the cinematography score, again, probably in the B to A range, but only because the budget was so low. Like if they had more, then they could afford to get really cool shots. Like in one of the sort of second act of the show of the movie where they were in the jungle and everything actually kind of reminded me of that movie Apocalypto. Is that what it's called? By Mel Gibson. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of that. And in that one you have these like really sweeping landscape shots of like the whole jungle and everything. And I don't think, well, maybe we did actually. Maybe they did have some shots like that in this film. Now it's hard to remember exactly, but nevertheless, the point is that they did a really good job on both of those accounts, on the story and on the cinematography. So I would rate this movie pretty high just on that. Apart from this being a really important message to get across. Right. Apart from that, I think just in terms of being a movie that's worth watching, I think that it is.
Yeah, no, definitely. I would. Yeah, I think that's right. Somewhere in the B+ to A- range, I think is a fair assessment. Yeah.
And there were okay. So there, in terms of the acting, we can talk about that for a second. The acting was, in my opinion, was really good. For the most part. I think probably for about 90% of the movie, there was very, very good acting. Like there wasn't anyone who would come into the shot where I was like sort of pulled out of the realism of the film, or anything like that. But there were like, I think like two characters where that did happen. One of them was the original partner of Jim, and he was like talking about how he can't do this.
Yeah, the one that was quitting.
The one that was quitting, yeah, because it was like the subject matter was just too crazy for him to deal with.
Yeah.
And but his acting was pretty bad to me. And I think there was one other person I can't remember. But overall, I was sort of looking at the overall picture, and I think probably about 90 to upper 90s or mid 90s. Good acting most of the time. What were your thoughts on the acting?
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, I was expecting kind of like Hallmark level, maybe even lower than Hallmark level type acting, and I was pleasantly surprised that especially some of the characters as you see them develop throughout the movie. I don't want to get, well, I guess it's okay to give spoilers, but the guy who worked for the cartel, Tim Ballard's guy that he mainly hooked up with to create the hotel that would attract the children so that they could rescue them, who was formerly in a cartel. That guy, I mean, I thought his acting was just like amazing.
Yeah, it was almost better than Jim's.
Yeah, and Jim did a great job. He did a wonderful job. But yeah, I just thought it was definitely emotionally. The movie emotionally moves you for sure.
Oh, like, the kid actors also did a fantastic job. Like even wonderful. Like the boy, he must have been like 5 or 6 years old. He just did an incredible job. And then the girl who was one of the other main characters, maybe she was what 9 or 10.
Yeah.
She did incredible. She did incredible. And what's crazy is that this
actors were amazing.
The movie was filmed 5 years ago, and it's just now being released. So these kids are now way older than they are in the movie. Yeah, which is crazy. But in terms of the acting, one other thing I wanted to mention is that the actors that portrayed the bad guys, like the what are they called?
The cartel or the traffickers?
No, the pedophiles. The pedophiles that were, the actors that portrayed them. They did such a good job that I actually disliked them, like as people, in real life. I was like, this guy needs to go to jail for real. That's how good of a job these guys did. And so the acting, I mean, for the most part, like I said, it was really, really good. So yeah, but guys, I want you to for sure stick around. We're just sort of chit-chatting about the movie, different aspects of it, but we are going to get into some deeper philosophical insights that Dr. Tyler McNabb is going to reveal for us that this movie can sort of teach us about philosophy. We're going to get to that in just a few minutes. Should we look at this? So some of the reviews of the movie have been very interesting, to say the least. There's one. Let me go ahead and pull it up. It's by it was on Rolling Stone. Pull up my scene here so we can all see it. Like, I encourage you guys to go actually read this review for yourself. We're not going to read the whole thing here, but now I can't read it. Oh, the mobile one. I think I could read the mobile one, but I can't read the one on desktop. Thanks, Rolling Stone.
Yeah, go ahead and see if you can read the mobile one, because I want you to read that one quote.
Yeah, the quote at the very end was just nuts. Let me see if I can pull it up here on mobile. So this is the mobile view. Let me see if I can zoom in.
Yeah, there you go.
So people can see. Come on now. There we go. People can see it on the screen here. Okay, so let me scroll down toward the very end of the article where he's sort of giving his concluding thoughts here. Let me see. I don't think I'm down far enough. There it is. Okay. There is visible suffering all around us in America. There are poor and unhoused, and people brutalized or killed by police. There are mass shootings, lack of health care, climate disasters, and yet over and over, the far right turns to these sordid fantasies about godless monsters hurting children. That's pretty nuts. The far
Yeah,
right turns to these sordid fantasies about godless monsters hurting children as if it's not real. Like, do you did he think that it doesn't happen? I don't understand.
yeah. When honestly,
Or
when I
does he
read this,
think that it's not horrible, like it's not worth fighting against and trying to put eyes on it, so that, like, there was one point during the film where Jim Caviezel, main character, was talking to this, I think he was like a billionaire in the movie, and maybe he is like in real life too, but he was talking with him and he was like trying to convince him to fund this whole hotel operation to send the kids to and everything so that they could free them. And he was like trying to explain and like help the guy understand like why this is so important to do. And Jim was explaining that like the reason why people don't get involved is because how gross, disgusting it actually is. And people just want to like almost pretend like it doesn't exist, like it's not there. And I think that's maybe what's going on in this review, is that like these sordid fantasies about godless monsters hurting, like they're fantasy, it's not real. Like there aren't 100,000 people in America every year that are trafficked, kids that are trafficked. Like these are not real statistics. These are not real people that are being hurt. It's just mind blowing.
yeah, I mean, when we looked up the statistics, right, because we were kind of trying to fact check our own on our own, and I think it was something like 300,000 or so children go missing.
350,000 people go
100,000
missing. 100,000 children
are usually are end up in trafficking, and that's in the U.S. alone. So we're not talking about anywhere else in the world, just the U.S. alone. So that's horrific. That's abhorrent. That's such a huge crime against humanity. So for him to downplay this, I got to be honest. When I first read this article, I had to like hold back yelling, and it was like, all right, when I go on to Capturing Christianity to talk about this movie, I'm going to have to like watch my tongue, because there are a lot of words that kind of come at me when I read this kind of softening or weakening the extraordinary crime against humanity that is sex trafficking, and obviously especially with children's sex trafficking. Like this is something so horrific that we can't downplay this whatsoever. And for him to downplay the film, to downplay the historical events behind the film, this is, if I may, just one second, this is a really sad symptom of our culture, right? This is a sad. It's a very telling. It just shows, it's a symptom of how sick we truly are in our culture right now, where being against sex trafficking is all of a sudden like a right-wing dog whistle. How absurd are we, right? That we can't even unite. Again, the film had nothing to do with underground conspiracies regarding drinking of blood of children and sex trafficking underneath the White House and things like that. This movie had nothing to do with any of that. These were based on historical events, and we can even get into more detail about how historical. But the idea that in order to truly endorse the movie or to appreciate the movie, you just must be a right-wing conspiracy nut job, and we should really be focusing on climate change instead. Wow, how sick are we?
Okay, yeah, I said lack of health care is like another one that's supposedly on par with child trafficking. Which lack of health care is a serious problem.
It is,
but these are, yeah. Yeah, but it's not. You don't just like try to undermine one by saying that like there's this problem over here, therefore like this is a fantasy. It's just
like if you would have told me like 5 years ago, or let's say it's before Trump, so in 2015, that like being against children trafficking would be like a right-wing dog whistle. Like I would be like, what? What do you mean that this is going to be political? It's going to turn into a culture war. I mean, it's just, again, it's a really sad sad symptom of a diseased and dying culture.
Yeah, it is. It is really sad, and it's super unfortunate. I mean, I wish that this stuff didn't happen. I wish that people could write things and get on board and support something like this without trying to, make I suppose, light of it. Like, again, calling it sordid fantasies. It's ridiculous. Okay, let me mention some other thoughts that I've got on the film. So as I was watching it, I was again taking notes, and one of the things that I had the sense of is that this didn't feel like a Christian film. Like, it didn't have the feeling of some of these more cheeseball movies, that are like sort of I'm really bad with words today, so forgive me.
Me too. It's okay.
Paradigmatic. Yeah, paradigmatic. Like, I didn't notice this film didn't have that sort of paradigmatic Christian film feel. So it just felt
cuss words, Cameron. It even had cuss words.
Yeah, true. So it didn't have that feel. So that alone might get people interested in watching it. So in my theater, there were actually kids, and that was really disturbing. Like, people brought their kids to come watch this, and they had to have been very young. Like, I was hearing them talking, and they sounded very young, like 6, 7, very, very young. It was terrible. On a sort of related note, most of the so I saw it on a Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. and the movie was packed.
Wow.
That is pretty crazy. Like, it packed in the sense of, like, most of the seats were filled by the time that the movie started.
Yeah.
And it wasn't sold out, but it was like on a this is still considered, I think, matinee, like in that range. So on a Wednesday during the week, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah. So I live as someone who formerly lived in Houston, who's from Houston. Obviously, Houston, massive population. Any movie theater you go to, especially at nighttime, right? Not so much the matinee, but nighttime, it's going to be, quite a bit of people. I live, compared to Houston, pretty much in the middle of nowhere. And, I drive 25 minutes to get to the closest theater, right? And I would say that it was about 75, maybe 80% full. And I saw my movie at 3:30 in the afternoon on a Wednesday. Now, my crowd was much older than yours, but nonetheless, it was still 80% full theater at 3:30 on a Wednesday. That is telling as well.
Yeah. It was. What's interesting is that the numbers seem to be going up from when it started, which probably has to do with the fact that there's like a special message that is given by Jim Caviezel at the end of the film. So in that message, he like encourages people to share the film and to encourage others to go watch it, and then even buy tickets for people to go watch it. Which, I mean, this is one of the things that I had a question about. Does Jim, like, how did he get so involved in this subject, in this topic? Like, does he? You may not know the answer to this question, but did he, like, how did he become such an advocate for ending child sex slavery?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Really,
I didn't have
really
time to investigate that further, so I'm not exactly sure. I'll pass on that.
Yeah, I wonder. It's interesting. So actually, maybe we could actually invite the audience to, if you know the answer to that question, then just leave it in the comments, and I'll try to pin one for people that know what was going on. One other philosophically interesting thing or line that got brought up in the film was by the ex-cartel member who was talking at one point. Now I can't remember the context, but I remember exactly what he was talking about. He basically said that the time of your death is the time to start really thinking about whether or not God exists, something along those lines. And so the question that I wanted to put to you as a Christian philosopher is, like, is that the time for us to be concerned about the existence of God, or are there other times to be concerned about it as well? Which, they're probably not saying that this is the only time. They're probably saying like this is maybe one of the best times, or a really important moment is near your death is you should start to consider whether or not God exists.
Yeah, and I think that probably does hit, just like factually. I think that probably is the time when most people concentrate their attention on that. Though, of course, we need to be weary, right? Like Jesus tells a parable of a guy who thinks he's gonna have all this time in the world to continue to live and do as he pleases, and Jesus says, you fool, your life will be demanded of you this very day. So I would encourage people to think about this um, prior to facing a sort of life and death situation, because you never know actually when you will die. So many people perish not thinking that today will be the day that I die. And so it's very important that we think about this now. But I do think that the film does provoke a lot of kind of philosophical thought, both about
Hmm.
ethics and about the problem of evil, which we can get into. But
Yeah, why don't we
I
go
do
ahead and
think,
transition?
okay,
Let's go ahead and
yeah,
transition to that. This seems like a natural point to do that.
yes, okay. So in philosophy, we'll do the ethics point first, and then we can get into the problem of evil. Um,
Sure.
so, kind of an ethics approach. There are these two sides in philosophy that debate, right? One side argues, we can call them moral realists. They argue that no, that there is objective morality, that there are moral values and duties that exist that don't depend on our own opinions about them, right? It's not like morality is a purely sociological factor or biological factor where it doesn't align with reality, right? No, that there are moral values, that it's really wrong to traffic children, to harm innocent people. It really is right to help old ladies across the street right, when they can't get across the street. It really is good to feed the poor and to be with those who are most need of mercy, right? These are facts that don't depend on our own opinions about them, right? They're objective. So there are more realists who think that no, there are moral facts that don't depend on our own interpretations or our own feelings about what's right and what's wrong. They exist. They're true regardless of what everyone thinks. Like Nazi Germany, right? Maybe people have seen the really interesting show on Amazon Prime, Man in High Castle, right? Where it kind of imagines, that the world gets overtaken by the Nazis. Nazis win, and then the Japanese win World War II, and they're colonizing America and making it into their own image, right? We can imagine that Hitler wins and brainwashes everyone to think Nazism is great. Nonetheless, Nazism is not great. It's morally abhorrent. It's an evil, right? So that's what we mean by objective. Then there are these kind of anti-realists who think that um, morality basically is just there's no objective truth to the matter about what's right and what's wrong, or that you might sometimes hear more anti-realists say that we believe that things are objectively wrong or right, but in all actuality, that's just because the way we have evolved, right, at a biological level. If we would have evolved, say, under slightly different circumstances, we believe different things about morality, right?
Mm.
If we would have evolved in a more similar, analogous situation to like wolves, maybe we would think that one guy in our tribe, gets his way with everyone and can domineer and lead brutishly. Or if we would have evolved more analogous way to dust mites, maybe we think it'd be okay to eat corpses, or um, if we evolved more analogously to bees, maybe we'd think that it was okay for um, female bees to kill their brothers, or something like that. And so, really, it's just how we have evolved. That's truly why we believe that it's wrong to do certain things or not do certain things. But in reality, it's not actually objectively wrong. You don't actually have objective duties that are binding upon you to behave in any sort of way, right? It's just an illusion from biology and sociology, but in reality, nothing is there, right? And so there are these two views: moral realism versus, we can call it anti-realism. And this um, this movie, I think, I would like to see it with my philosophy friends who are anti-moral realists, who think that there is no objective value, who think that there are no objective duties, that we have obligations to behave and not behave in certain ways. Because when you're watching the movie, you're just provoked to such righteous indignation. And it just seems so evident, so clear that no, it is objectively wrong to traffic children. Like
Yeah.
the movie is a great movie to kind of stimulate seeming strong experiences that we have that lead us to believe that that objective morality is binding upon us. That there is objective morality. There really is objectively wrong to traffic children. I just want to watch the movie looking at kind of my philosophy friend and just watch them as they watch the movie and be like, oh, wait. So this isn't objectively wrong, right? This isn't objectively wrong, right? And just continue to ask that question all throughout watching the movie, because I think it's quite obvious that indeed it is objectively wrong. Even if you give some sort of kind of skeptical account, debunking account, some sort of like, oh, it's just evolution and sociology, watch the movie and then just tell me at the end of the day that it's just sociology and biology. If even if you come up with some sort of scientific explanation for why we believe the way that we do, I would still look at you and say, no, it's still objectively wrong. I don't care. My seeming is stronger that there is objective morality than any sort of debunking story will be any sort of seeming that will be produced from any sort of debunking story. And so I think this movie is a great movie to provide evidence for the existence of objective moral values and duties.
Yeah. Well, I let me give you a little bit of pushback on that. So, it seems like you're kind of appealing to seemings, and maybe one other way of putting it is like intuition. So it just sort of seems true to you that morality is objective based on just watching the film. Like you can watch it and you can get these experiences of like, this is wrong. This is absolutely objectively 100% wrong. What is going on? And there's multiple points throughout the movie where you get these seemings. Okay. And I think that's going to happen to pretty much everyone, including people that, might have these sort of weird sexual proclivities. I think that even those people know that this is wrong stuff that they're engaged in or attracted to or doing. And so, but okay, so it seems like there's an appeal to intuition, but someone might come back and say, well, we know that intuition goes wrong. Okay, intuition intuition is fallible. That might be one way to say it, is that it doesn't always get it right. There are certain circumstances where we thought we were really right about something, like say the Earth looks flat, right? It seems to us that the Earth is flat.
Standing still or something.
Right, but we've got this other evidence now that debunks that, and so we know that our intuitions can be wrong. And so how do we know that we're not wrong in this situation? And so maybe this is just a little bit of healthy skepticism. Not saying that we are wrong, but maybe just saying like we should at least be cautious when we have these really strong, because it's also the case that when you have these intuitions during this movie, they're also coupled with emotions. I think it's not just like this rational process where you're thinking about the truth of something and then it just seems true to you, right? That's not just what's going on. It's also that you have this emotional, it's like a visceral reaction that you've got where it's like disgust. Okay.
Yes.
And it's like gross. And so when you have maybe an intuition coupled with some emotion, that's when it starts to get tricky, because we know that when we have these sort of emotions are not necessarily rational. And so maybe this is just a word of sort of caution. But what are your thoughts on that type of objection?
Right. So two things. One, I think actually that our cognitive faculties could be such that it's built to receive disgust to help inform our views about reality. Like,
so you don't really see those. Yeah, you don't really see those as disconnected. Then
that's right. That it could be such, either by God or by evolution or both, that we've evolved in a certain way to where when we see something with great disgust, say, like images that are
Child
insinuated
trafficking
in the movie, that it's supposed to strengthen our perception that that's wrong. but because of how wrong it actually is. And so why not think that this disgust factor is tracking the truth here, so to speak, or helping our seemings become even more reliable, working together with that. And so there's this debate in philosophy, and I won't get too much into that here, but there's this debate in philosophy about how can we know that something is true. In one view, it's called proper functionalism. It says, well, hey, you've got these cognitive faculties, right? You've got these mental processes. Think of your mind as something like a computer, or a computer and something more, anything like that. Standard computational model of the mind in cognitive science, where it has programming, right? This computer has programming. And if I like start talking to you and all of a sudden my screen goes blue, my computer is not working properly, right? But if I open up the link you sent me and it opens up to you and I'm able to talk to you, right, then we would say that my computer is functioning properly. Well, we can talk about the mind in the same way. Like, it's built, has a program, right? And it has various modules or faculties that's goal is to get us to truth. And so as long as our cognitive faculties are functioning properly, right, and aimed at truth, well, then we can know what's true in reality. So it might be the case that if this disgust faculty is, we'll call it for lack of a better name, is working properly, and it's working in conjunction with other cognitive faculties, say perceptual faculties, and they're all working together in unison to produce this belief, and the belief is true, right? And this is all stemming from properly functioning faculties, and that at least in this scenario or limited scale are all functioning properly and reliably, then we can know. We can know based off of these faculties. And so I do want to say that there's another theory of kind of like what makes a belief within your rights, right? Are you within your rights to believe something, or have you committed sort of epistemic sin, right? So there's this concept in epistemology called justification. And so
well, actually, let me
ahead.
slow you down a little bit. Let me go ahead and try to summarize the first point that you made, is that there's this theory in philosophy called proper functionalism, and that's a really fancy like philosophical term that just means like your brain is working as it should, right? And so that what you're saying is that like this disgust faculty or reaction that we have to this the content in this film, like maybe that what's going on is that our brains were designed to do that. And so it's not that like we should be skeptical of these beliefs that are formed when we watch this movie just because they've got this like disgust thing that's sort of tagged on to this intuition that these things are wrong. Rather, like that actually is almost evidence that you should trust this, because if that's the way that our brains were designed, then that's what, it sort of makes sense that it's all functioning together. But I guess a further question would be, why think that our brains were designed in such a way as to produce that? Because that would be like, I think, a necessary component of that view would be to argue that like our brains were designed in such a way that it would produce this disgust reaction, and then also the intuition and everything. And so that's part of this overall like plan that was put in place either by some like philosophers think that evolution could have done this. Some philosophers think that God, that God, only God, a being like God can do something like this.
Right.
And then a lot of people are just skeptical of that. A lot of people are like, well, we don't have these design plans. But yeah, we'll maybe talk about that a little bit more before we move on to another topic or another.
Yeah. So, I don't think that is needed, an awareness that your cognitive faculties are reliable. So, for example, animals don't have this awareness. They don't even have awareness of their cognitive faculties, right? Young children, the same thing. And yet, all that matters at the end of the day is that their cognitive faculties are reliable. Now, it might be the case that with mature cognitive thinkers, once we become aware of the question of, are my faculties reliable, right? Well, then maybe we need to have some sort of reason for thinking
deeper basis. Yeah, some deeper basis for thinking that our brains were developed in this way, in the right way.
That's right. And so in this case, though, I think that This is actually going to blend into the next topic that I was about to get into. This is where I think that phenomenal conservatism, this theory of justification, can come and help. Because if something just seems to you to be the case, then on this theory, it says you have justification for thinking you're within your rights, for thinking that it is, this is the way that it is, unless someone shows you a defeater. So basically, like, it just seems to me that
unless someone shows you that gives you like some sort of counter evidence or good reason to reject it.
So it just seems to me that Cameron exists, and then I'm talking to him right now. If all of a sudden someone comes in and like pushes a button, and then like Cameron's head goes and like opens up, and I see like a bunch of metal stuff coming out of him, that would be maybe a good reason, a defeater for thinking that that's that Cameron is. I'm talking to Cameron, and I'm not talking to some robot, right? And so, in the same way, like if something seems grotesque, immoral, an abomination, crime against humanity, and you don't have any defeaters for it, then you're justified in thinking that this is a crime against humanity. This is objectively wrong, right? And so, in the same way, you can even use this for our cognitive faculties, whether or not they're reliable, right? It just seems to me that our cognitive faculties are reliable. I don't have any evidence to suggest that they're not, so I'm justified in thinking that they are indeed reliable.
My rights, yeah.
That's right. And Thomas Reid has an interesting. He's a philosopher from the 18th century, and he's got a interesting argument where he basically says, if you trust some of your faculties, why not trust the rest? Right? Because they were made in the same shop. Right.
Yeah.
So,
like your perception of 3D objects around you. Like if you can trust that.
That's right. Yeah. Why can't you trust, your other faculties? Which he didn't apply it like this, but which includes maybe your faculties aimed toward belief in God, or in this case, moral realism. Yeah. And so, it seems like you should trust all your faculties until you're given reason to distrust maybe one particular faculty. But until there's like this proven evidence against that, then you're totally within your rights just to keep going. And I think what this movie does when you're watching it, your seemings become so strong. Again, these seemings are like these experiences that incline us to belief. These experiences are so strong that like it doesn't matter if you can give a so-called explanation, a debunking argument or anything like that against our moral beliefs. Our seemings are going to be so strong that objective morality does exist, that it's any sort of seeming that would be produced from hearing this debunking story is just going to be eaten up by the strong that you'll get when you watch the movie.
Here's an analogy that I think might be helpful for the audience. I think Alvin Planting has used it in a different context, but I'll sort of co-opt it for this. So the analogy goes like this. Suppose that yesterday you were sitting down reading a book, whatever book you can think up off the top of your head. Maybe you were reading Lord of the Rings or something like that.
Yep.
Okay.
And you're reading Tyler McNabb's Religious Epistemology. Yeah.
Yes. Suppose that you're reading, for whatever reason, Tyler McNabb's Religious Epistemology. And then the next day you get accused of murdering someone during the time that you remember reading a book in your house. Okay.
Right.
And then suppose that these people have some evidence. It's not just that they're accusing you of this. They have some evidence. And what is that evidence? There's evidence of someone that's close to you told them that that's what you did. Okay. So there's sort of testimonial evidence against you in this case. So that's one piece of evidence. And then maybe another piece of evidence is video footage of someone with your build that looks like you, that has the same clothes that you have. Like maybe they were wearing a green shirt and you happen to have the same green shirt, something like that. And so you've got this evidence against you that you were in this place murdering someone. Okay.
Yep.
Yet, just by thinking about it, or like introspectively thinking about it, that you were sitting in your office the day before reading a book. Okay. Reading Tyler McNabb's Religious Epistemology. That's what you were doing. You weren't murdering anyone. So even though someone's giving you this sort of counter evidence, this just the memory that you have of what you did yesterday is so strong that you're going to be like, no, I did not do that. This evidence is not going to make me suddenly like reject my memory beliefs about what I remember that I was doing yesterday. And so that's I think it's a good analogy of like kind of what's going on here is that you
Yeah,
can
no,
have this counter evidence, but it's not going to overcome the initial seeming that you've got.
right. Exactly. Exactly. Um, I don't know if you're familiar with one of my favorite shows in high school, though, was a show called Prison Break. Have you ever seen Prison Break?
Oh, yes, and I think you've actually mentioned it in a previous show. How that
Yeah,
there's similar plot here is that he was
that's right.
accused of being a murderer, and
That's I
yeah,
have
he went to
video
jail for the wrong
footage,
reasons.
testimony. They might even had some sort of DNA evidence, but he has a strong memory of not pulling the trigger and killing the senator's brother or something like that. And is he irrational? Like, should we be like, oh, sorry, the objective evidence or the evidence, from a third person
Yeah,
perspective suggests that you did. Go ahead and abandon belief. It's like, no, your experience, your seeming is so strong that he didn't pull the trigger that it's gonna overwhelm any other considerations, and he's totally within his
yeah,
rights to believe he didn't murder. And so that's the idea. When you're watching this movie, it's going to seem so utterly obvious to you that morality is objective, that it's wrong to traffic children. That even if someone tries to come up with a so-so explanation for why we believe in morality, some sort of debunking argument, probably that's just going to melt away from the strength of the seeming you get when you watch the movie.
yeah. Okay, so the overall picture of this first thing we're talking about ethics so
Yeah.
far. You gave an argument that moral realism is the case
Yeah,
just if you just watch the movie. Like if you just
that's
watch
right.
it, it's seems obvious, seems objectively true that
Right.
trafficking children for the purpose of sex is just utterly wrong. Okay. Uh,
And again, you have to
now that
say that it's not objectively wrong if you're an anti-moral realist. So I mean, it's
yeah,
a really uncomfortable position to be in.
yeah. Okay, so that's the first step. How does this tie into like maybe Christianity or Christian
Right.
philosophy? Like, what is the connection here between this film getting us to the view that moral realism is the case or like morality is objective, and then
Right.
how does that like tie into Christianity?
Right. Well, you might think that you would just expect there to be objective moral values, especially moral duties. So obligations that we have to behave in certain ways. Maybe you would expect that more on theism than atheism. You could go that route, kind of a Swinburnian C inductive inference, right? Bayesian inference. Um, where if one hypothesis predicts the evidence better than another hypothesis, well, then that's some raises the probability for the overall hypothesis at least a bit. Or you might just go like, no, I don't think naturalism can fully account for moral obligations. Right, you're going to need some sort of obligator, some sort of authority figure. And that's God. So you can go that route as well. Or you can just say like moral knowledge, right? Would we have is moral knowledge? Let's just go ahead and assume like I've convinced the anti-moral realist, right, by watching the movie, that there is objective morality. We know certain objective truths about morality. Um, is knowledge of objective morality more surprising on theism or atheism, right? And so I think we can sort of develop an argument that it's predicted on theism, but not so predicted on atheism, or that maybe even moral knowledge is impossible for an educated naturalist. Yeah, you could go that kind of route too, kind of think of Plantinga's evolutionary argument against naturalism. But I think for the Christian, you know, what one thing that they'll need to kind of come away with is understanding sort of like, if God, why evil, right? And so, in this case, I think it would be good to kind of figure out um, a good sort of explanation or response to the problem of evil. Because you might convince your more realist, you might convince your anti-realist friend to become a more realist, but then your more realist friend is going to be like, all right, well, if God, why evil? um, and because you do see a lot of evil, and it's grotesque, and it's hard to comprehend, and it's hard to imagine that this happens on the daily, by the millions. So I have a preferred response to the problem of evil I can get into if you want me to.
Yeah,
Kind of a short
I
version.
think That is a question. What's interesting is that as much time as I've done thinking about the problem of evil, this movie didn't really get me to think like this is so bad. This is evidence against God's existence. I never got
Right.
that sense when I was watching this movie. The sense that
Right.
it gave me was this is a bad thing. We need to like do something to get rid of it,
Right.
which was interesting. Like it's I actually would have expected before going into this that it would give me a sense of like, this is so bad that this is evidence
Right.
against theism. But I didn't. It's interesting. I didn't really get that sense. Nevertheless, obviously, that is an argument that atheists have been putting forward for a
Right.
lot of time, or yeah, for a long time. So yeah, let's. I think we've
And
done
Tim in
enough
the
to sort
movie,
of.
it doesn't seem like he ever questions his faith. In fact, it is just like the opposite. Right. I think that's an important point to highlight. He's like, these are God's children. They're not for sale. And he appeals right to scripture when he's about to arrest a pedophile, right? About better is to be thrown, into the ocean, right? Um, than with something around your neck than offend one of these little ones. Um, I mean, so he's driven by Christianity, and it doesn't seem like anything in tension with him uh, that is at odds with his faith. But I do imagine that some of my atheist brothers and sisters, when they watch the film, they probably will think, well, God, explain this to me, right? Explain this to me, you theist. Um, right. So um, there's I'll give two kind of a two prong very briefly a two pronged response to evil more generally, and that obviously can be applied in this situation. So when it comes to evil, I think first off it's good to understand, like, first off, what do we mean by God? So now there's a debate that I'm sure your audience will be familiar with, right? This debate against kind of these harder classical theists, who think that God's not a person like you and I are persons. He's not even a thing. He's propertyless. He's um, might even think that since he's not a person like you or I, he doesn't have obligations, right? He is goodness itself. He doesn't have obligations, though. There's nothing outside of him that causes him to behave or dictates that he ought to behave in any sort of way. God lacks moral obligations altogether. And again, he's not a person like you or I. We understand him only by way of analogy, right? We only get sort of analogical knowledge of who he is. Or as Aquinas would say, we can know him by his effects, right? Or maybe we can know him by the inner witness of the Holy Spirit, as Aquinas thinks. But we can't, come to understand God's essence. And so, like, what is God? God is goodness itself, and evil is just the lack of good. It's the lack of God. It's the lack. It's a privation, right? And so it's not like God creates evil. Again, evil is a lack, right? It's a lack of power, a lack of ability, a lack of a faculty, a lack of perfection, a lack of goodness. It's a lack of reflection of God himself. Um, and since God doesn't have obligations, well, you just might not think that God's obligated to do certain things. Like maybe if I were God, I'd do X, Y, and Z, right? Well, that's understanding if God was a person, but he's not a person. So maybe we're not in a position to suggest that God would do X, Y, or Z anyway. So there's this kind of view that's developed by people like Father Brian Davis, the spelled like Davies, in case anyone is curious about this sort of view. Now, I think this helps support what the skeptical theist is trying to get after. The skeptical theist says, and sometimes the skeptical theist will believe that God has duties to behave in certain ways. And the skeptical theist is after, though, like, are we actually in the position to know what God would do or wouldn't do in a situation of permitting evil? Is the skeptical theist in a position, or sorry, are we in a position to truly understand what goods can be actualized by God permitting this instance of evil or not? And so I always like to give a story. I can't recall if I've ever given this on your channel, but my son Elijah, he's now 9. When he was 3 years old, he was on like a swing, like an adult swing, like on a rocking chair type thing on a porch. And my wife told him, "Hey, you know what? Get down from that. You're going to get hurt." And my son, um, he being a good boy, he was listening to his mom. He was going to get down, but he wasn't just going to get down, like by sitting down and getting off. He decided to jump off the swing, and when he jumped off, his arm got caught on a nail that was happened to be sticking out of the swing that we didn't notice. So he was like hanging on by a nail, and his flesh was open and it was wounded, and he was screaming and wailing. And I literally just pulled in. I just came home from teaching. I was like my first year teaching at now HCU when I was teaching in Houston, and I was thinking like, oh, I'm going to be met by my loving children. They're going to come up to me. Everything's going to be awesome, right? I open the door and I just hear like screaming, wailing, gnashing of teeth. And I look at it. We go straight to the hospital, and they pin Elijah down. Again, he's just about to turn 3. They pin Elijah down. They tell me, they say, "Can you please hold him?" As they just go ahead and stitch and put needles and kind of do some minor operation on his arm as I hold on to him. And I'm just like looking at him. And all I can do is say, "I love you, I love you, I love you." And he's just kind of looking at me like, "Dad, why? Why would you let them do this to me, Dad?" Dad, daddy, daddy, daddy. That's what he kept on saying over and over and over again. And again, all I could do, I couldn't communicate. There was a cognitive gap between me and my son. I
Yeah.
couldn't communicate to him why I'm allowing them to do this, and why it's actually because I love him that I'm allowing them to do this. All I could do there was be with him, hold him, and say, "I loved him." Just reinforce that. I loved him. And so in the same way, if there's even a bigger gap, like imagine you're a classical theist now, where God's not even a person, like you and I are persons. There's a massive epistemic gap, right? Isaiah the prophet says that our thoughts are not like God's thoughts, right? Um,
His
there's a
ways are higher
massive
than our ways.
That's right. There's a massive epistemic gap between me and God, more so than even me and my soon-to-be 3-year-old son. So if my 3-year-old son can't grasp what's going on, what makes me think that I can grasp what's going on at the ultimate level? And so just because I can't come up with some sort of greater good, some sort of reason, some sort of explanation, doesn't mean that there isn't some sort of greater good. And obviously, if you think that
Just like your
God,
son, just like your son couldn't come up with a reason
that's
at
right,
the age of 2.5 or whatever that
that's
he could
right.
explain why you were holding him down and letting people operate on his arm.
That's right. And if God's not a person, like you and I are persons, and if he doesn't even have moral obligations, like are we really in a position to judge whether or not God would likely do this or do that when it comes to some instance of evil? Maybe you think through scripture or through tradition, we can know through his revelation telling us in that way. But outside of those sorts of things, what makes us think that we can make this sort of judgment call in some particular instance of evil? And so anyway, that's generally kind of my response to the problem of evil. For those of you who watch the movie and who are compelled to think about this sort of topic.
Yeah, so you take what's called the skeptical theist approach to
That's
the
right.
problem of evil, which highlights this real big gap that exists between what we know and what God knows, and how God has access to all sorts of knowledge that we don't necessarily have access to. We do know, however, that God is all good. God is perfectly loving. And so if that's true, then we'd have to interpret what happens on this world through that lens of this is
Right.
so then the question would be, is there some sort of conflict between what happens in the world and God's being perfectly all good or perfectly loving? And album planning has been pretty great at showing that there's no explicit contradiction between those two. So then the question is, what is the sort of implicit contradiction that might be there? And that is a lot more difficult to defend. And I think that's why atheists have mostly appealed to, like, well, this is just, even if there's no sort of conflict, like explicit conflict or contradiction between the existence of these horrendous evils and God's existence, nevertheless, it just seems really unlikely. But then that's where skeptical theism can come in and be like,
Exactly.
well, that inference that, like, this probably, there's no reason, there's probably no reason that God would have to allow this. That's an unjustified inference based on the fact that just because you can't see a reason doesn't really give you a whole lot of reason to think that there is no reason on God's part. Just because, again, that gap between what we know and what God knows is so large. And especially, like you say, like if God's, if God, on this classical theist picture of the existence of God, where God is not like a person like you and I, in the sense of, like, it takes time for us to think about things and try to process and come up with reasons and do like a decision matrix and stuff, like none of that God is not sitting there trying to, like, weigh the options in real time and, like, figure out what's the best course of action. Like, that's not what's going on.
So, we can't anthropomorphize God to be someone basically just like you or I, but, like, all-knowing and all-powerful, right? That would be making God into our own image. At least that's what classical theists argue. And so if you've got this epistemic gap, and you also have this ontological gap, so to speak, it just really seems we're not in a position to make any sort of judgment, especially if my 3-year-old son wasn't in the position. It might be such that it's just God, he's here, and he's telling us right now as we go through our trials, through our hardships, as children are suffering around the world, he's telling us, I love you, I love you, I love you. And
so let me, since I gave pushback on the other one, let me give a little bit of pushback on this one. So, and I can tie it, I think, back into the film. So the film, the whole message of the movie, it seemed like, was to, like, get people interested in helping eradicate sex trafficking, child sex trafficking, right? Like, that was the point, I think, of this film, was to get people aware of this. This really horrible thing that happens, and then to do something about it. Like, maybe that's actually a good time to plug this. Tell us a little bit about this anti-trafficking program, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops.
Yeah, so if you go to this page right here, or if you just put in, like, United States Catholic Bishops, and this website should pop up. You'll see all their initiatives that they have against ending trafficking. And if you scroll all the way down, there's even a place where you can see what they're for and what they're against, that sort of thing. But if you, go up more. There should be some place that says, right there, support our work to fight human trafficking, donate now. And so if you want to help stop trafficking, obviously this isn't the only place to do it. But if you trust the church and what they're doing, and especially doing it from a Christian point of view and with a gospel-centered point of view, I would encourage you, if you want to do something about it, right? There's another theodicy that we could have talked about virtue, right? Virtue building theodicies.
Yeah.
And you got to have sort of instances where things can go astray, things can go bad, in order for you to develop, courage, or in order for you to develop perseverance or selflessness, that sort of thing. And so if you think that, you go the whole virtue theodicy route, and you think, well, I need to become a better human being, and it's good that I'm given the option to become a better human being, to make the right decisions, to help the poor, to help those in need, to help those who are trafficked. Well, then here's a great practical way that I encourage all of your listeners to go to learn about, and to perhaps donate, do your part in stopping human trafficking.
I've got this linked in the description of the video, and this is not the only place that you can give to help stop human trafficking, but this is the one that we're just highlighting in this stream. And but the point of the film, to kind of get back to the point that I was getting at, sorry, we've got I think my wife is maybe vacuuming outside the room. It's just a little bit loud. So the objection would be that if there's always a reason, like God always has a reason for allowing such and such to happen, especially like if there's a sort of epistemic gap between what we know and what God knows, then why not just, like, let bad things happen? Because it's all working toward toward the good. Like God has a reason for everything. So like, why do we have any sort of motivation to get involved in something like stopping or eradicating sex trafficking of children? Like, if God always has a reason, then why do anything in the first place?
Well, the reason could be the opportunity to become a better human being and become a better person, and so it's you would be missing out on that reason, so to speak. There's also this idea that if our duties, at least in part, come from God, then and God is commanding us to seek justice, right? To he even in the Old Testament, which you can take in lots of different ways. Even in the Old Testament, though, there is a condemnation for anyone who kidnaps a human being. So we know this is bad. We know in the New Testament that it's bad. So you might think, well, it goes against God's commands, and God calls us to baptize the nations, preaching the gospel and teaching the nations how to behave. And so we're not going to sort of say, well, hey, if I don't do this, maybe God will make more goodness come from something like that. That's not where our duties lie. Our duties lie. It's communicated through human nature, if you're an Aristotelian, or it's communicated through Holy Scripture or through our cognitive faculties, these commands, and we're supposed to obey them and let God figure the rest out, so to speak. I think you're muted.
Sorry, yeah, I was there's still some sound going on, so I'm trying to like, okay, well, it's back now. One of the responses that I like to that type of objection, like if God just has a reason for everything, then why not just like let bad things happen because there's some justifying reason why it's happening. That seems to assume some kind of like ethical framework, like consequentialism, where what we're doing, we do things right and wrong based on the consequences. So like if it's a good consequence, we do it or we allow it to happen or whatever else. But that's a very controversial moral framework to operate on.
Right.
Consequentialism.
And for especially operate alone on.
Right.
Because
because consequences are not completely irrelevant, but they can.
Right.
But if you solely rely on those, then you can get into trouble really quickly.
Right.
There's all sorts of ethical what are they called? Puzzles or paradoxes.
I mean, like, The Purge. Like imagine that for the sake of argument, for your audience who's familiar with the movie The Purge, right? Imagine for the sake of argument that legalizing murder and rape and theft once a year actually does overall decrease murder, theft, and rape throughout the rest of the year. And so overall, it's sort of a net positive, so to speak. Well, that means if you're just after sort of the consequences that lead to the best result, that means you should advocate for something like The Purge, which to me is a reductio, and it shows how absurd the situation is. And so it's not simply about consequences, though consequences can absolutely play a role.
Okay, I think that's going to do it for us today. Let's go ahead and just sort of wrap up and bring it back toward the film and discuss anything that we maybe haven't mentioned about the actual film itself. Like maybe we can, so for people that have watched this whole stream and haven't seen the movie yet, like would you still recommend that they go watch it?
Yes. No. Again, I wasn't inclined to watch the movie. I just, again, not my sort of. I'd much rather watch I watch like every single Marvel movie, every single DC movie, every single Star Wars or Star Trek movie, right? Like that's my thing. But honestly, after watching it, I was like about to call my mom and tell her, "Hey, you need to go see this movie." And I do recommend the movie. Again, there's no conspiracy theories that play out in the movie. Some of the reporting in the movie is actually underreported. So in the scene where he saves all these kids on the island in the movie, it's like around 60 or 50. In real life, I think it ended up being like 122, some number like that. I mean, this is a story of a real American hero. And while you might disagree with some of the things that he said, or no one's perfect. He's clearly heroic. He's clearly virtuous. And I think overall, if the point of making this movie is to make us all more aware of what's going on. The movie is a success, and should be watched by others so they can kind of see, not just statistically, right? There's this scene in the movie where they're talking about how many kids they can save in the abstract with this billionaire donor, and the billionaire donor is like, when you were working for the American government, I was happy to help you, but now that you're so low, I'm not going to get into this sort of trouble. And then he's like, all right, stop thinking about this as like statistics, how many children you will save. He leaves the billionaire with a picture of a girl, just one girl. And he said, just focus on this one child, right? And the vision of this one child, right? It's one thing to know these facts statistically, but it's a whole nother thing to actually sort of make it become more existential, make it become more personal. And so while even people who are, I'm sure everyone, on Twitter would be like, yeah, I'm against sex trafficking, right? Yeah, that's horrible, bad stuff. But actually coming face to face with it more through visual experience, I think is going to ignite more passion and overall more awareness. So yes, I would encourage everyone to go ahead and see the film.
Yeah, there's.
So I would recommend.
Yeah, there's two reasons I think to see it. A, it's a good film. Like it's close to an A, so like B+, A- area. So it's good. It's just on that basis, like it's a decent film worth watching. But then the message, I think, is another reason to go and see it too, is that it is going to. Some people might say that it changed them, right? It changed them in the sense of like it opened them up to. Mm-hmm. The horribleness of what's really going on out there, and right. it's awakened them to try and help and do something about it. Like even if it's just donating some of your money, like that. Right. That's something that I think that it's worth watching the film for, just for that, just to be a sort of awakened to the disgusting nature of this thing, and start to try and help and do something about it. Amen. So. But yeah, let me know in the comments what you guys think about these types of movie reviews. I think this is the second movie review we've ever done on the channel. The other one was God's Not Dead back in that was filmed in 2014. I think we shot it maybe in like 2018 or 19 or something like that. Maybe 19. But I'd love to get your feedback on whether or not you like these types of movie reviews. We have plans to actually do another one regardless, on Oppenheimer, which is coming up just next week, I believe. So we're going to, I think that, isn't that correct? I think, it is.
Yeah, 21st or something like that.
Yeah, today's the 13th, so next week.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're going to be doing another, that one's going to be really, really interesting because it's going to evoke a whole lot of interesting conversation about the ethics of warfare and atom bombs and how that, it's going to be very, very interesting stream, very interesting interaction between those ethics and Christian ethics, and how what should we actually believe as Christians? Should we be pacifists? Should we be something else? So that's what we'll be discussing next week. And if you'd like to see more again of these movie reviews, just let me know, and maybe even drop a movie that you'd like us to review in the comments. We'd love to take a look at that. But Tyler, thanks for coming on. It's been awesome.
Yeah. No, thanks, man. Have a good day.
Okay. All right, we'll see you guys later in the next Capturing Christianity video very soon. So see you guys soon. Hey, it's me again. Actually, don't leave yet. I've got something super, super important to tell you. So first of all, you're awesome. Like you just watched a really, really long video just now, and you're still watching it. That is actually pretty amazing. Secondly, we have hundreds, literally hundreds of other apologetics related videos for you to watch on our channel. Go check them out. I've interviewed exorcists, hosted debates between Christians and atheists. I've even made response videos to atheists. All of that is available on our channel. Go check it out. Third, I rely on people that see value in my work, people like you that watch videos to the very end, to keep the lights on around here. Literally, this is how I feed my family. So if you see value in the work that I do, please consider supporting this ministry and becoming a patron. Links to that are in the description. Oh, and have I mentioned that Christianity is true?